episode 102. This week we cover the Outrageous Okana. This one, the Enterprise is going between two planets to do their survey mission when they discover a small ship in trouble. They contact the captain of the ship, and it's a guy named Okana, and he's being all kinds of whimsical and not really overly concerned about the situation, but Picard's like, well, I guess we better beam you over here and like fix your problem. And the guy says, oh, that'd be great. And then Okana hears a female voice on the comm system. It was the transporter chief. He's like, wow, a woman, that'll be great. Troy was sitting right there in front of him. Right there. She even spoke. He didn't say anything about that. But Okana beams over with his damaged part from his ship, more whimsical and laissez-faire attitude from him, and so he's charming the crew except for the transporter chief, who told him off when he hit on her. And then he's walking down the hall with Data. He thinks Data doesn't understand humor. Data understands the technical meanings, but not the true nature of humor. And so Okana is kind of baffled by Data, and Data is baffled by Okana. And then Okana goes into the crew quarters of the transporter chief that he had hit on earlier in the day. She was fine with it. She'd changed into an evening gown for some reason. But Enterprise is along its way, and they get this tiny little ship from one of the planets showing up, and they lock laser beams on them. And Picard and Riker are trying not to laugh, but they're making fun of lasers being pointed at them. They ask the people on that ship what's going on. He's like, you have Okana, and he's a wanted man on this planet, so we demand he be turned over to us. And Picard's like, well, not so fast. What crime did he do? And he's like, never you mind, Picard. And Picard's like, well, then never you mind. I won't hand him over. And then a second planet's ship shows up, same thing. Picard's like, what did Okana do? And he's like, he stole my jewels. And Picard's like, well, he didn't do anything to me. And they argue amongst themselves until Picard gets sick of it and ends the transmission. Then Picard talks to Okana, and Okana won't tell him what's going on, essentially. He says he can't really say what's happening, but he proclaims his innocence in the whole situation. Picard tries to reason with the other ships. They won't have it, so he brings everybody on board. It turns out the son of the guy whose jewels was stolen was the father of the child that was being expected by the daughter of the other guy. And the jewel was a wedding gift because they were keeping the wedding secret. And then they were like, oh, well, that makes a lot more sense. And Okana must be innocent. And he was like, yeah, I was just the middleman delivering the gift to the girl when my ship got broken down. Otherwise, you'd never have caught me. And they were like, oh, well, I guess the joke's on us. And everything was okay. And then in the B plot that was going on for most of this time, since Data didn't understand humor, he ran a holodeck program, got himself a comic, and he was trying to understand the nature of humor. That wasn't working out so well, so he goes to 10-4, talks to Guinan, who's giving him some jokes, but Data's not catching on. He's like, well, maybe your jokes aren't funny, and Guinan's like, they are funny, I'm Guinan. So Data was like, oh, okay. So they both go back to the comic. They try some more, but the audience is programmed to laugh at anything Data does, so every little gesture or sound Data makes, the audience laughs. Data catches on to that, and then he's despondent. So he's like, well, maybe I'll try again later to understand humor. And so he shuts the program down and saves it for next time. And that was basically what was going down. Some interesting notes in this one. The transporter chief that Okana hit on that he later went to go visit was none other than a very young, uncredited Terri Hatcher before she went on to fame in Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman. It was one of her first roles, I believe, uncredited as it was. Also, the comic was Joe Piscopo, famous in the 80s as a comedian. Originally, they asked Jerry Lewis to be the comic. He turned it down, so Joe Piscopo did a Jerry Lewis imitation as part of the comedy bit they were doing in the holodeck. So they got Jerry Lewis in there, regardless if he was actually present or not, through Joe Piscopo. One weird thing is they had some inconsistencies. Picard was recommended by Worf to not let Okana have access to the ship. Picard said, "That's a great idea, Worf." Made it so. And then Okana's just walking willy-nilly. They said later he was reported in 3 different crew members' quarters. He was left alone. They would just walk off, leave him to go to wherever he wanted to go. They never explained why that was. They 180'd it. And also, Worf went to get Okana at one point when Picard wanted to talk to him about why these 2 planets wanted to arrest him. And he walks directly into a crew member's quarters. Didn't have to ring the bell or do a security override or anything. Just walked right into the quarters. Nothing stopping him. That's the only time I can recall on The Next Generation they did that. They either had to ring the bell and get permission, or Worf would do a security override to get into a quarters. But here he just walked right in, grabbed Okana. Also, it was never explained why Worf was so agitated by Okana, but he wanted to fight him, but restrained himself. It was just a little bit of odd, a little bit of inconsistency, but overall not a bad episode for Season 2. No Dr. Pulaski in the thing, though. That might have helped. But pretty much 102.